Hey everybody, it's Jesse, and I'm back again for another installment of Social School. And in keeping with the conversation that we've been having about stress management, and in particular self-talk, what we're going to get into today is a conversation about cognitive distortions or stinking thinking. And basically, it's that little voice in your head that convinces you that there's something wrong or there's a problem. Basically, it's kind of like the little lies that we tell ourselves that do actually cause our stress or our difficult feelings. And so as we get into this, remember last time we kind of talked about that little angel on one shoulder and that little devil on the other shoulder. I'm here to tell you that a lot of times that little devil is a liar. Surprise, surprise. And you might think that, you don't do these things, but I would be willing to bet as we go through today, and I kind of talk you through some of these things, you might be able to kind of see where maybe you haven't always been honest with yourself, or you might be you might have convinced yourself that things are a little bit worse than they really are. And so what are cognitive distortions? Well, if we break this definition down, and I don't know if you've had a psychology class or not, but the word cognitive basically means your thinking, right? What's going on in your head. And the word distortion, some people are a little more familiar with, but basically it means twisted or fake. So what a cognitive distortion is, it's twisted or fake thinking that causes negative or difficult emotions and behaviors. And really what it comes down to is it's when we lie to ourselves, and sometimes it's an effort to help us deal with stress, but it's the lies that we tell ourselves that cause our stress. And so there's some good news and some bad news here. And so the good news is that if you find yourself stressed from a cognitive distortion, there's something you can do about it, right? But the bad news is that we are doing this to ourselves with our thinking. And so, the reason why I started off last week with the self-talk lesson is we have to acknowledge that, this is a thing that we do to ourselves in times of stress. We just make it worse. And whether you're overthinking or you get trapped in the moment, somewhere in there's a cognitive distortion that is definitely contributing to your stress. And so we need to take a look at those. So before we get too far with this, just a word about lying. Lying is a thing that, there are probably some of you who might say, oh, I never lie, I'm honest. Some people have a hard time lying, and they think that they're always honest. But honestly, I think that lying is something that all of us do, even if it's just the little white lies. If my wife asks me, how her butt looks in her jeans, I may or may not always tell her the truth. And so, we lie sometimes. Your parents are ask you if, you got your homework done or if your room's clean. And those are, the little lies that we tell on the regular. But what I'm talking about is the kind of lying that we do to ourselves. And for a lot of you, you might think, well, I don't do this, and why would somebody lie to themselves? And it's not something, for the most part, that we do on purpose. I think a lot of times when people say to themselves, man, you know what, as soon as I get home, I'm going to get my homework done, or I'm going to do those dishes right after I watch this show, or as soon as my video game is over. But those are, just some of those little lies that we tell. And this is something that, like I said, I'm pretty sure all of us do it. And so what I am going to do with you guys over the course of the next couple videos is actually we're going to look at the top 10 cognitive distortions. And so I'm going to actually break that into two different videos. And so what I'm going to do first is just give you a quick look at, what those top 10 are, and then we'll get into the specifics in a minute. Here are the top 10 cognitive distortions. And these aren't listed in any particular order, right? Number 1 isn't more prevalent or more dangerous than number 10. They're kind of listed in no particular order. And so, all or nothing thinking, mental filter, disqualifying the positive, mind reading, fortune telling, doom saying, emotional reasoning, should statements, labeling, and blame. And there are lots and lots of lists out there of cognitive distortions. These are just the top 10 that I cover with students and clients. And as we go through these, and particularly in this video today, we're going to focus on those first 5. And as we go through these, I just kind of want you to see, I want you to be honest with yourself, since we're talking about lying and honesty. I want you to be honest with yourself and see if you can't find yourself somewhere in here, and see if there's not some of this stuff that is really contributing to your stress. All right, so the number 1 top 10 cognitive distortion that I've got on my list is all or nothing thinking. And this happens when we think in terms of absolute. So either things are absolutely perfect or they're not okay. Either we're, perfectly on time or early, or we're just not going. Or, we convince ourselves that, things are always a certain way. They never go our way every time, this person does this thing or whatever. But thinking in terms of all or nothing is definitely. So you know that you've been guilty of all or nothing thinking if you are one of those perfectionists, right? So if you've ever been working on a poster or an art project, or you're writing something and things are going pretty good, and it's all looking exactly how you want, and then all of a sudden there's a little smudge or a smear, something's maybe not quite in the right place, and so you have to rip it up and start over. Or maybe you're one of those people that has just this exact outfit, and you always want to wear this certain outfit in this certain occasion, and everything is going along and it's all good and fine until you notice that maybe there's like a little thread loose, or there's a smudge on your white sneakers so you can't wear them all. This all or nothing thinking, this habit of perfectionism, is extremely stressful. So if you think about, how stressful it is to be a perfectionist, if things are either have to be perfect or they're not okay, then you're going to spend a lot of time not okay. And so, we need to think about that all or nothing thinking when it comes to, just kind of where our head's at, because this perfectionism, it causes a lot of stress. It causes some people to not turn things in. It causes people, in a real extreme example, I've had clients and students before where if they were going to maybe even be like 10 or 15 minutes late to work, instead of showing up late for work, they just call and they're, I'm sick, I can't come in. And it's one of those things where if you really thought this through, it's better to be a little bit late than to not show up at all. For me, if I was going to work a 6-hour shift, I'd rather get paid for 5.5 hours than get paid for nothing. Or sometimes, students will, maybe not go to a party because they're going to be late, or, if they don't have exactly the right outfit or the clothes that they want to wear. And so, this all or nothing thinking causes a lot of problems. The other one that I point out with all or nothing thinking is kind of, using words like always, every, and never. And when people do that, they're kind of in that all or nothing thinking. If you've ever been in an argument and you were like, you always take his side, you never take my side. Every time, we get in an argument, it's always my fault. And if you start to think about those words, they're probably not true. I know that I have gotten in arguments before and said, you always interrupt me. And, I just kind of have to step back and have this realization that no, it's not always that these things happen. It's more often than I'd like. And so people don't want to, just say it for how it really is, because, it just doesn't have the same power in an argument. And so we get ourselves even more mad than we need to be when we use those words. There's a certain kind of power that comes from, a statement like, you are late every single day. And so when we do those things, we're getting ourselves a lot more worked up than we need to be, and it causes a lot of stress that is really unnecessary. Number 2 on my list of the top 10 cognitive distortions is something called mental filter. And basically in mental filter, what we do is we focus on the negative aspects of something while ignoring the rest. And so we do mental filter when we can only remember what went wrong, what we didn't like, the things that didn't suit us, or what isn't good about a situation, instead of trying to focus more on the positive. And number 3 on my list is disqualifying the positive. And in disqualifying the positive, we shoot down positive experiences for no good reason. And I'm going to cover mental filtering and disqualifying the positive because they're kind of like different sides or different facets of the same thing. And basically, this is when we only pay attention to the negative, or we shoot down positive experiences really for no good reason, and we can ruin our day that way. You can ruin a work shift. People, honestly, unfortunately, sometimes ruin their whole lives. This negativity, a lot of times, is easier to see in other people, right? And so we all know those negative Nancys or Debbie Downers. Not really sure why both of those examples are women, but we can tell, and we know how it is to be around those kinds of people, right? If somebody is always complaining or can only talk about what isn't right or what isn't going on well with them, then that's kind of hard to be around. And yet at the same time, a lot of times when we're feeling down, when we're feeling stressed, we're kind of doing this to ourselves. And so I really encourage you not to be a negative Nancy, not to be a downer on yourself, but to really focus on the positive. And if you think about it, probably all of us have been guilty of this at one time or another. So I want you to imagine for a second that you get a report card, right? You get back in the day, we had those paper report cards. Back in my day, we used to have paper report cards. But anyway, so you get this report card, and on that report card, you've got an A, a B, another B, an A, and then an F. Now I want you to think to yourself for a minute, is that a good report card? In your opinion, would you say that's a good report card? And I have most of the students, most of the clients that I talk to about this would say, oh no, there's no way that that's a good report card. If there's an F on there, then that's just awful. And they look at all their grades and they see the A's and they see the B's, and then they look at that F, and for some reason they put a magnifying glass on that F, and that's all that they can see or think about. And if you were realistic with yourself, if you were honest with yourself, is your report card good? Yes. Are all of your grades exactly what you want them to be? No. But we have this tendency to just kind of focus on the negative or the things that are going wrong that don't quite suit us. And in all fairness, we come by this honestly because, if your parents look at that report card, they're not going to, spend a whole bunch of time talking to you about all your great grades for the most part. Probably what they're going to do is they're going to give you a hard time about that bad grade. And so we get this idea, that if there's something wrong or something that we need to work on, that the whole thing is wrong or bad. I know that some of you have had an opportunity to see some of your work evaluations, and unfortunately we have this tendency to only pay attention, to the criticisms, to the things that, maybe we didn't like so much or hurt our self-esteem. And when we focus on the negative, we can have this tendency to think, that we are bad, or that we're bad workers, or that we're bad students, or those sorts of things, when really the truth of the matter is you're just a human being and you've got some things, that you need to work on. And so I really challenge all of you out there to try to focus on the positive, because I can tell you your mood, your feelings are going to be determined by what you pay attention to. And if you only pay attention to the negative, you've got that negative filter going, then yeah, for the most part, things are going to feel pretty negative and your life is going to be pretty negative. And so, moving on, talking about this disqualifying the positive, I have students who tell me that, oh, school sucks and work sucks and oh, it just all, it's all bad. And I never really believe them. I know they're caught up in that disqualifying the positive. Because, then you ask some follow-up questions. And so, I say, what you're telling me is that there's nothing good that ever happens at school? And they're like, oh, no, it's awful. And I'm like, well, where do you see your friends? Well, at school. And I'm like, okay, so how are you going to get into college? Well, I go to school. Or then I ask them, about work. And he's like, okay, so work sucks and there's nothing good about it, right? And they're like, well, yeah, it just sucks, man. And I'm like, well, so what about those paychecks? How do you feel about those? And they're like, well, yeah, but, they take out all these taxes and, whatever. And I just immediately come back with, well, you know what? If you don't want those paychecks, I'll take them. Number 4 on my list of the top 10 cognitive distortions is mind reading. And that happens anytime that you assume that you know what people are thinking without really knowing, right? Without having sufficient evidence. And so, even though honestly, for the most part, I don't know what I don't know what's going on in other people's heads and probably don't want to, that doesn't stop me from trying. When we get stuck in mind reading, it causes a lot of problems. It causes a lot of stress. Anytime you're trying to figure out, why somebody did something, or you think, especially if you think that they did it on purpose, it's a cognitive distortion. It's a lie. Whether you think that you can read minds or not, you probably can't. Psychic powers are, for the most part, for movies and comic books. And maybe there are some of you out there who, may think that you can do this, but probably not. But again, it does cause lots of problems. I think about a story. I had one young lady who told me that she was just sure that her boss hated her. And I'm like, okay, well, what's going on? What makes you think that he hates you? And she's like, well, he always makes me stay late, and I'm supposed to get off at like 8 or 10 o'clock, and he always makes me close. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Hold on, you think that your boss hates you? She's like, oh yeah, I know, he hates me. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense, because really, if your boss hated you, he'd probably send you home, right? So if you're being asked to work extra, it's not because, your boss hates you. It's probably because he knows that you're a good worker and that you do a good job and appreciates what you do. And eventually, she came around to think about it. But I've worked with athletes before who were convinced that their coaches hated them, or students that thought that their, teachers hated them, or whatever. And that all comes down to mind reading, because the truth of the matter is, if your teacher hates you, they're probably not going to, necessarily give you a hard time, because they're going to try to avoid you. Or if your coach didn't expect good things from you, or didn't really, like and appreciate you, then they probably wouldn't give you the time of day, and they would pay attention to another athlete who they liked more, or they thought had more potential. And so again, this mind reading thing causes a lot of problems, especially when we think that, people are doing stuff to us on purpose, or they're trying to mess us up, or mess us over. And it's those sorts of things that really get people bent out of shape and cause us a lot of problems and a lot of stress that really, for the most part, is completely unnecessary. Number 5 on my list of top 10 cognitive distortions, and the last one for today, is fortune telling. And this one is for all of my psychics out there, right? And so fortune telling happens when we try to predict how things are going to happen, or how they'll occur, even though we don't really know. And you may think that, you're psychic. You might think that you know what's going to happen, but chances are you don't. And just because you had a dream and the dream came true doesn't mean you're really psychic. I know for a fact that the sun is going to rise tomorrow. That doesn't make me psychic. It doesn't mean that I can tell the future. It just means that I'm intuitive. I pay attention. But fortune telling causes a lot of problems when we shoot ourselves down. when we don't give ourselves a chance for something. Maybe, you don't go and apply for a job because you're just sure that they'll never take you. Or, I've had clients who, wanted to find a girlfriend, but they wouldn't ask this person out, or they wouldn't ask that person out because, they just know in their mind that, it's never going to happen. She'll never go out with me. And so, we have to give ourselves a chance here, and you have to believe that good things are possible. And actually, fortune telling is one of the few of the cognitive distortions that actually has a positive side or an upside to it. So if you take some of the cognitive distortions that you see up here on this video, and you start to flip them, you believe that good things are happening, or that good things are going to happen, then that actually gives you a chance of making it happen. If you wake up on a day and you're like, oh man, today is going to be the best day ever, I know that I'm going to get that job. I know it's going to be a great shift. When you believe that good things are happening, then you can actually take this cognitive distortion and turn it into something positive. And that's really what we're looking for. And so when we look at these last couple, the mind reading, the fortune telling, we can start to see how, if you think that you can read somebody's mind, you're probably lying to yourself. If you think that you know the future, you're probably lying to yourself. Can we make good educated guesses? Sure. But a lot of times when we do, and especially when it takes the negative, we've kind of taken cognitive distortions and we've lied to ourselves and we've hurt ourselves and we've made ourselves a lot more stressed than we really need to be. And so when I come back in a couple weeks or with the next installment of this video, we're going to look at 6 through 10 on the top 10 cognitive distortions, and we're going to see, some of the other ways that, our twisted or fake thinking really is the cause of our stress. And so what I challenge you guys to do over the next week or two is I want you to really think about that voice in your head and what is it telling you? How is it affecting your moods or emotion? How is it affecting your stress? And is it possible? Is it even just a little bit possible, that you're lying to yourself and it's causing you a lot more stress than you need or you deserve? So I want to thank everybody again for your time. I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. I probably won't see you on video again until after that. And so again, just want to wish everybody a happy and safe Thanksgiving. Easy for me to say. And that's it from Social School. Bye, everybody.